and welcome back to the 20th century here at Music History at Educator.com. Well, okay, Dixieland blues and jazz is what we're talking about today. And I don't want to insult anybody by just doing one lesson on Dixieland blues and jazz, but this lesson and the next one on, further developments in the 20th century in rock and roll are shortened. I could do an entire course, multiple courses on rock and roll history, jazz history, but being that this is a survey course, please keep that in mind. We're kind of going through such a fast period or we're going through quickly a period of music history that probably could be talked about for a lot longer. But at any rate, we're talking about Dixieland, blues, and jazz. So now for something completely different. All right, so yeah, there you go. We just did Rite of Spring, we did serialism before that. As I say, keep in mind this is a brief survey. Okay, Dixieland goes to blues, goes to jazz, goes to rock. All right, we know a lot about rock and roll, we know a lot about jazz. Maybe not as much about blues or Dixieland, but they're all interconnected, and finally we find ourselves in our actual country here, the United States of America. Finally, we're talking about non-European place. A lot of composers, as I mentioned, came over around war times, World War I. Mainly, most of them came over in the 1930s, before World War II or after. Those are the classical music composers. But we've had music in this country. It goes back a very long ways. And so Dixieland, blues and jazz, ones we're talking about today, they're all linked, right, through post-Civil War America, and in particular, the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The second World's Fair that we've talked about in the 20th century. There's the one in Paris that we talked about for Impressionism, and now we get the Chicago's World Fair, the Chicago World Fair in 1893. This is post-Civil War America. We're not going back further than that. The fair changed everything, and it changed a lot in the entire country. It did not just change stuff for, blues or Dixieland or jazz or rock. It changed stuff throughout the entire nation. This was an absolute massive operation, this fair, and it really, really changed a lot of things for the country. So let's get a little Civil War lesson here on geography. And of course, the Civil War is something that most of us know a lot about in regards to American history, but maybe not the music. So at the end of the Civil War, when the war was technically over and slaves were freed, the South, the whole dynamic in the South was supposed to have changed, but it didn't really. And we know that through the civil rights movement of the 1960s, in the 20th century, that was not true. So we still have this divide of North and South. And the South is going to contain more African Americans than the North. And in this post-slavery time, there's still this sort of kind of a culture of the slave songs, the spirituals. That's the word I was trying to get out. The spirituals. And as time kind of got away from this, so as we got closer to the 1900s, or closer in that direction, say to the World's Fair, more communities started to pop up in the South, and the music sort of morphed from the spirituals into actual kind of these poignant styles that were centered around the different towns. And in particular, we had New Orleans, and New Orleans Dixieland music was very popular. And if you know about the geography, this is where we get to the geography, the Mississippi River goes all the way down to the Delta, New Orleans, and all the way up. Look at a map. Goes all the way up through Illinois, and it's been rumored that a lot of musicians started before this World's Fair in New Orleans and took a riverboat up to Chicago to the fair and performed along the way and were famous by the end of the trip. So as I say, we know a lot about this time period in American history, but maybe not the music. And having this sort of geography really helps, as we have New Orleans way, way, way at the bottom, like very, very south, and then we're going all the way up to Chicago for the World's Fair.